Hey guys, first I want to apologize for the long Vietnam War lecture yesterday, 44 minutes. I'll be shorter today, wrap some things up foreign policy wise, and then I'm going to get into civil rights, okay? And I'll probably do 2 days on that. And then that's pretty much rounding out what we have. We'll have a test next week, and that'll be it. I may throw some stuff in there, a little commentary on, later presidents from Gerald Ford, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan. A little bit on that kind of stuff. So just some more foreign policy here. While we're trying to contain communism, okay, we've already talked about NATO, okay, and NATO was formed to really up against Russia, okay? So you have the Warsaw Pact with Russia and its satellite nations, the ones that kind of surround the outside of Russia that they are in control of. So, your Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Bulgaria, so forth, okay? So we're going to set up what's called SEATO, which is the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and this is September 54. In this, Australia, Britain, France, New Zealand, Pakistan, Philippines, Thailand, and the United States. Okay, so now we're in alliance with Britain and France with NATO, and now with throw in Pakistan, the Philippines, and Thailand. Okay, and Australia. Okay, and these all pledge all for one, one for all. So it's just like NATO. It's a defensive alliance, military alliance, and they pledge to protect South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, okay? And so, yes, you would see some of these troops also in Vietnam, okay, along with the U.S., okay? All right, now, there was also something set up called METO, Middle East Treaty Organization. Now, if you look at this, Britain, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Pakistan, not the United States, but by virtue of NATO and SEATO, the United States is allied with Pakistan here, and Britain and NATO, now, and Turkey in NATO. Now we're intertwined with Iran and Iraq, okay? But they're not maybe so much our allies. And so this is those entangling alliances, okay? Now, we did pledge to protect Taiwan and South Korea, okay? And we still do that to this day, by the way, okay? Now, METO is no longer, and SEATO is no longer. This went out in the 1970s, okay? I think it's 72. We broke apart that alliance, okay? Now, we're still friendly with all of these nations, okay? But we're not in a military alliance with them, okay? So critics of this call this pactomania, like all these pacts. This is what George Washington warned us about. And it really does make sense when you start talking down here, these entanglements with Iran and Iraq, even though we're not in that alliance, okay? So that's pactomania. We're trying to encircle communism and stop it from spreading there, okay? Let me give you another pact, okay? How about the Paris Pact? And this is October of 1954. Now, this is where West Germany's given their sovereignty, okay? This really takes place in 1955 when they get their sovereignty. So basically, the United States was part of controlling West Germany for 10 years, okay? Now, kind of interesting, we're going to allow West Germany to build an army of 500,000. Now, some people, you can kind of laugh at that and say, well, Germany started 2 world wars in the first half of the 20th century. Now we're going to allow them to raise an army of 500,000. What are we thinking? Okay. No, obviously that turned out okay. Hitler was limited to a 100,000 man army back with the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. So Britain and France will keep large forces in Germany as long as we're welcome. Well, guess what? We're still welcome. We're still there. Okay. And this, of course, Deutschland is the proper term for the country Germany. Okay. All right. Moving on. Okay. Actually, I had a question about this from one of the questions you guys turned in about the CIA. Formerly considered the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services during World War II, the 80th Congress, that do-nothing Congress that Truman kept calling it, established the CIA. Okay. I'm not sure why the name change. I'm sorry, whoever asked that question. But, this agency is only allowed to serve on foreign soil. The Central Intelligence Agency is not supposed to do their thing, which is gather information on domestic soil. Okay, we have the FBI for that. Okay, so there's always been this fear of the CIA and the FBI working together. Okay, so as you move through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there's kind of a wall put up between the CIA and the FBI just out of that fear of what President Trump refers to and many others refer to as the deep state. Okay, and so there's this kind of wall. It's kind of a interagency competition or interagency division. You kind of see this in the military, like where the Navy and the Marines, or the Navy and the Army, they don't really like each other type of thing. That's similar with the FBI and CIA. So the CIA, performing tasks overseas, does a lot of things that are top secret that we don't really know about, okay, that some don't come out for decades later or ever, okay? And the way I kind of view this, and some people view this, is that if you're going to be dealing with people that operate in the sewer, we're dealing with maybe evil people or bad actors, sometimes you got to get in the gutter to deal with people that are in the sewer, okay? So that's kind of the thought process there. They do things that maybe we don't really want to know about, but they're doing it in defense of the United States. Well, sometimes they make mistakes, okay? You can't always trust that they're going to make the right decisions, okay? So we can look at some of the things they did that we know about and talk about them, okay? So here we see help put down a corrupt king in Egypt, okay? Egypt's over here. And put in a king or a leader that we thought would be good for the world and for the United States especially. And that guy's name was Mubarak, and he was in power for a long time. We helped this man, the Shah of Iran, come to power in Iran, okay? And this is a very important story for understanding our relationship with Iran today and over the last couple of decades. This guy, the Shah, he's not really a good person, but he's our person. He's a guy that we can work with, okay? He's a military dictator, as you can tell from the uniform there, okay? He's pretty harsh on opposition, okay? It'd be unfair to say he's this wonderful, dictator, because he's not. Because most dictators are not wonderful. But they serve a purpose, okay? One is to give the U.S. good oil concessions and to control radicals within his society, okay? Well, the Shah in 1979 had consolidated power, pretty brutal, and he was fairly unpopular in his country, and just because he was so iron-fisted. Well, he got sick, he got cancer, and he came to the United States for medical treatment. Because 1979, as today, I don't know, you could go to any other country if you want for cancer treatment, but if I had my choice, I'm going, I'm coming to the United States, I'm going to the Mayo Clinic or something like that if I had a choice. So that's what he does. While he's away in the United States, this guy, the Ayatollah Khomeini, leads the Islamic Revolution of 1979. And I talked about this at the very beginning of our class when we talked about terrorism. I mentioned a movie called Argo, okay? Well, the capital of Iran, guys, is Tehran. It's right here, okay? And, Iran, as a nation in 1979, was pretty cosmopolitan. It was pretty westernized. Women wore blue jeans. They went to school. They went to university. They had shopping malls where, women wore lipstick. I mean, just these kind of Western liberal ideas. And, the Ayatollah and the very religious Muslims, and they are Shia Muslims, they felt like their society was being corrupted. Their culture was being corrupted with these Western ideas and the Shah. And so they led the revolution. Now, what they did, guys, is they attacked the American embassy here, which was U.S. soil. And they took the Americans there hostage. And this is why there's kind of that deep-seated dislike for Iran in this country, especially people my generation, your parents' generation, because they remember this, and it was awful. They paraded these Americans. These are civilians. These aren't military. They blindfolded them, handcuffed them, paraded them in front of cameras, and it was really a bad deal. So anyhow, if you see the movie Argo, which is fantastic, it talks about 6 of those Americans that escaped the embassy and fled to the Canadian consulate or the Canadian ambassador's house, and he held them till the CIA got them out. Okay, and it's a crazy story about how they get them out. Okay, so you got some time, watch that movie Argo. Okay. So really from 1979 on, they have ruled, okay? And so Iran goes backwards. I mean, it goes back towards, women are treated as property. They are not, allowed to pursue their dreams and that sort of thing. Plus, Iran has really become this more radical state sponsor of terror, where they fund terrorism. So we've really put the screws to Iran as far as economic sanctions go. Trying to get the rest of the world not to buy their oil, not to do business with them, banking with them, anything like that, to really try and hurt their economy so that the people of Iran will say, you know what, we've had enough of this religious rule. It's a theocracy, okay? Another thing, in the 1980s, they helped anti-communists in Guatemala come to power, okay? And there's some things that were pretty shady. There's some pretty good movies. Recently, there was one called Air America. And if you look at this, and it's kind of a conspiracy theory, but I think there may be some truth to it, is where the CIA was involved with running guns and drugs and that sort of thing. Things got out of control. There was a point where the Iranians had these hostages, and the Reagan administration be kind of behind closed doors, traded some weapons to these anti-communists, and it was kind of a 3-way deal where money would go to Iran and we would get our hostages, this sort of thing. So that's called the Iran-Contra affair. Okay, so you can look that up if you want. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so you get the CIA, and they're still doing some interesting things. We're going to see pretty soon. On the whole Russia investigation to Trump, John Brennan and James Clapper. Brennan ran the CIA and Clapper the NSA. Were they involved with kind of trying to frame some Trump officials and so forth? So we'll see. That's supposed to be coming out any time. It's called the Durham investigation, okay? All right, a couple more slides here. All right, so guys, in 1953, shortly after the Soviet Union gets the hydrogen bomb, Joseph Stalin is going to die. Okay, natural causes, but he's dead. Can I get a round of applause? Stalin is dead. Okay, one of the most murderous human beings ever to grace this planet. Okay, taking over for him. Now, you got to understand, it's the Communist Party that in the Soviet Union. And it's called the Politburo, and they're going to choose the successor to Stalin, okay? So they're looking for somebody that's tough, somebody that's going to be tough on America, a hardliner is what they call him, a hardliner. And so they choose this guy. This is Nikita Khrushchev, okay? Now, Khrushchev is really kind of this tough-talking communist, all right? But history teaches us, although most Americans, despise this man, he really was not as bad as we thought, okay? He did something when he came into office that nobody had done in 20 plus years and lived to tell about it. And that is he criticized Joseph Stalin's policies. This becomes known as a secret speech. Now, this isn't in your book. This is some stuff I learned in graduate school. But the secret speech, talked about how brutal the Stalin regime was towards their own people, okay, which is fair. I mean, come on. He was brutal. And when Mao Zedong of China finds out about what Khrushchev said in the speech, Mao Zedong, who's a hardline communist in China, who led the communist revolution, is angry with Khrushchev for criticizing Joseph Stalin. How dare he? Okay, so we didn't know about this until much later. Okay, but so in this picture here, this is taken from a video during the Cold War. When Eisenhower was president, we exchanged visits. In fact, Khrushchev wanted, more than anything else, he wanted to go to Disneyland, okay, in California. And so they exchanged visits. And then they had Nixon, who was Eisenhower's vice president, went to Russia. Khrushchev came here. And they had what were called the kitchen debates, really debating the tenets of communism versus capitalism, okay? And in this picture of Khrushchev, he's pounding his fist on the podium saying, "We will bury you." Now, he's not saying that nuclear war way. He's saying that economically. Okay, and so that is part of the Cold War, is which country's economy can outpace the other, which country's economy can out-militarize the other, because we do get into an arms race here. And not just nuclear arms, but, tanks and ships and carriers and all this, okay? So, obviously, we're going to win that. And capitalism is going to defeat communism, okay? Which is, kind of an important lesson of the 20th century, for all you that like the ideas of socialism, communism. You might think about it. If you want your country to have a strong economy, where people can prosper and grow and have opportunity, okay? So these are the debates they're having, okay? So I'm not really afraid to say that, guys. I mean, it's history. It teaches us stuff, okay? So the insecure Soviet leaders called for a peaceful coexistence. Ike agreed to meet. They exchanged the visits and so forth. Now, Austria had become an issue. So if we go back to the division of Germany, which I don't have in these slides, okay, but this one's pretty good here, okay? So you got West and East, okay? Well, Austria is right down here, okay? And it was divided as well. And so in 1955, a peace treaty signed between Soviet Union, U.S., Great Britain, France over Austria. Austria will come out of all occupation. All troops will be left, will be gone. Russian, American, French, Brit, all gone, okay? And they will become a neutral country, as they are to this day. They are not part of NATO. Okay, so that's a day that is celebrated in Austria. I spent a few hours a night in northern Austria. It's a beautiful country. Okay, or if you've ever seen the movie The Sound of Music, right? Okay, all right. So that is that. Okay, now two more things on the Cold War, okay, and then I'm done. All right, so the Soviets proposed a summit conference, Big Four to meet in Geneva. It's U.S., Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union in July of 55. The goal is to discuss issues between the West, which Western Europe and the United States. Eisenhower calls for open skies. He says, look, Khrushchev, let us spy on you. You can spy on us. And that way we know nobody is, going to start a war or invade other countries and that sort of thing. Can watch troop movements, that sort of thing, okay? Protects against fear, okay, and surprise attacks. The conference brought no solid results. And so because of our fear of the Soviet Union expanding communism or moving troops and doing something crazy, we started spying on them. Using this aircraft, which is the U-2 spy plane, and here's some of the specs on this plane. It's a pretty awesome plane. It's still flying today. It's got a length of 63 feet, wingspan of 103 feet. Okay, it's 16 feet tall. The ceiling is 90,000 feet. So, guys, when you watch planes fly over the sky, so you see the contrails. Those are flying at 30 to 35,000 feet. Okay, that's where they fly at. And you can just see a little speck of the plane when it's way up there, okay? At 90,000 feet, you're not going to see this plane, okay, with the naked eye. And we didn't think the Russians could pick it up with radar, okay? Even if they did pick it up with radar, we didn't think they could shoot it down, certainly not from the ground at 90,000 feet, okay? And so we started spying on them. Well, the Russians went to the United Nations, and they said, the United States is violating our airspace. They're spying on us. And we're like, no, we're not. And this U-2, by the way, has the most sophisticated photographic equipment on the planet. So it's taking pictures from 90,000 feet, okay? And we're like, we deny it. Eisenhower administration denies it. No, we're not, okay? Well, the Russians figured out that they could shoot one of these down, not from the ground, a surface-to-air missile, which is a SAM, okay, but an air-to-air missile, okay? So they, flying a plane at 45,000 feet, were able to shoot down one of these U-2s. And the pilot, a guy named Powers, Colonel Powers, actually survived, okay? And so the Russians had not only the U-2 plane wreckage, but they had the pilot. We didn't know what happened to the pilot and the plane. They just disappeared. So the Russians come back to the UN, and they say, the U.S. is spying on us, flying over our airspace. And we're like, no, we're not. And then they produced a photograph of the pilot and the plane wreckage. And that's about the most embarrassing thing that happened to Eisenhower in his 8 years as president. But the United States was caught lying to the world, okay? Doesn't make us look too good. Now, this U-2 plane provided some big, benefits, okay? And one of the things it did was when flying over Cuba, which in 1958, Fidel Castro overthrew a guy named Batista in Cuba, and Castro's a communist. And so Cuba fell to communists, and by virtue of being communist, a natural ally of the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union moved nuclear warheads onto the island of Cuba. We didn't know about it until this U-2 plane flew over and spotted them. Okay, and then what happened was known as the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1963. And this was when John F. Kennedy was president. And so, Kennedy was, what do? This is 90 miles off the coast of the United States. This is scary. Those missiles could reach Washington, D.C. in a matter of minutes. So JFK is being tested by Khrushchev here. And so the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which was created by that do-nothing 80th Congress, recommended that Kennedy invade Cuba, or at a minimum, take out those missiles from the air, okay? Kennedy decided to do something different. He thought that doing that would provoke a war with the Soviet Union. Nobody wants a war, a nuclear war. This is, scary stuff. And so he decided to quarantine Cuba, basically blockade it, surrounded it with U.S. ships, and told the Soviets that they would not allow any Russian ships to come into Cuba. So when Russian ships left ports in the Black Sea and headed towards Cuba for 13 days, the world sat on pins and needles. This is one of the closest times we came to having a nuclear war. And as it turns out, guys, as those Russian ships were moving close, there was kind of a back channel deal made. This was not done by Kennedy or Khrushchev. It was done for people that worked for both of them that knew each other. And they talked about a deal. And each side of those proposed that deal to JFK and Khrushchev. And they both agreed on it, which prevented, those Russian ships being stopped by American Navy. And so basically, here's the deal. Russia would remove the nuclear warheads. The United States would promise never to invade Cuba. And we would give $50 million in medical aid to Cuba. Castro was not part of this conversation. He was not involved. And when he found out, he was outraged. He thought, having these nuclear warheads in Cuba would allow him to blackmail the United States. Okay. And he was mad. Okay. But crisis was averted. Okay. And there's a movie called 13 Days about this. Okay. It's pretty good. Kevin Costner's in it and some other people. But anyhow, crisis averted, all right? And then one more slide before we get to civil rights tomorrow. Operation Paperclip, just wanted to bring this up. As we move into the space age, okay, the German scientists that had created the V1 and the V2 rocket, especially the V2 rocket, okay, this is the same technology, this rocket, that would be enhanced, improved over time, that would allow the United States to put a man on the moon. Okay, and the lead scientist on that would be this guy right here. His name's Werner von Braun. Operation Paperclip was an operation at the end of World War II to capture as many German engineers, scientists, mathematicians, and so forth, and bring them to the United States after the war. We did not want these scientists to fall into Soviet hands, obviously. Now, if you're a German scientist, which country would you rather live in? The United States or the Soviet Union? Okay, I'll let you answer that question. Okay, so just wanted to bring that up, and we'll do, I can do a little bit more on the space race and so forth a little bit later. Good movie there, October Sky. Okay, I'm going to let you go. I'm at 26 minutes. Civil rights, I think you'll enjoy my lectures. I have some personal anecdotes with that as well from my time living in the South, and just how this country overcomes a lot of ignorance and hatred of our past. Okay? Take care, guys.